Well, hello, all you heli huddlers out there. Welcome back to another episode of CMH's virtual heli huddles. Today, we're going to discuss all things via ferrata. So, hence the helmet. We got their lanyards. We got a carabiners, or technically called clippy clippies by some of our presenters later on. But before we get into all of that, I want to start this show out by acknowledging we at CMH are privileged to operate in the traditional territories of the Ktunaxa, Secwepemc, Syilx, and Stoney Nakoda nations. So as they say in Tanaha, Kisuk Kiyukiat, which means welcome. And you may be wondering where the previous host, Brody Smith, has been for the last couple of days, but some of you may be aware that he's taken up real estate now. So after a very successful April Fool's joke, he's busy in real estate college. So he may come back to join us for another presentation, we'll say, on the next one. Now, I'd like to also make some more shout outs for the viewers across the virtual world. I've got Kenneth McAllister, good afternoon from Edinburgh, and Robert Turner from the Blue Mountains of Ontario. So that would be good afternoon as well. Good evening from Switzerland, from Nick D. And Paul Chassin. Hey, Paul, I skied with you a bunch in down my hometown kicking area called Kootenay. And then we have Kristen Fry in Calgary. Good morning. And so we got Simon Greenwood from London, UK, where a lot of the spring blossoms have been frosted. That's too bad. I'm here in the Bugaboos at the moment, and we had about 20 centimeters overnight, so I know where you're coming from. Unfortunately, we're not skiing it. I'd also like to take the moment to introduce my co-host. That's Ali. Hi, Ali. Ali is our employee experience manager, and she's the perfect person to recruit and hire our newest team members. Ali's been with CMH for 7 years now, and fun fact, she loves canoeing.
I sure do. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce my special guest co-host, Peter. He's been guiding with CMH for 24 years now and is also the area manager at our Kootenay operation. Fun fact, Peter loves mountain biking and has crashed in many cool places all around the world. We have two new panelists joining us on the huddle today. I'd like to welcome Carl, 24-year guide and area manager at our Bobby Burns operation. I'd also like to welcome Jeff, 18-year guide and area manager at our Caribous operation. Wow, strange. Again, we are all wearing the same thing in true Canadian fashion. We're wearing our favorite hockey jerseys. Game on. Well, Mercedes and Graham will be joining us off camera to support the online Q&A. They'll be answering your questions as they come in, so feel free to keep them busy in the chat. We will also address some of your questions during the Q&A at the end of the event. Now, just like previous episodes, we will be asking you a skill testing question based on information in today's huddle. So from our friends at SunCloud, we will be giving away this pair of polarized Rambler sunglasses. And from our friends at Dakine, we will be giving away this very good looking goggle case. So keep your eyes and ears peeled because one of you will be the winner.
Nice, thanks, Ali. So based on today's Heli Huddle theme, all things via ferrata, we're going to discuss what they are, and more specifically, the ones we operate. At CMH, we have more adventure than you know what to do with, so if you're looking for a playful escape, you've got to check them out. Really, really cool.
Sounds great, Peter. Well, we've got 4 of them to be specific. We've got the Nimbus and the Conrad in the Bobby Burns, the Skyladder in the Bugaboos, and the Zilmer in the Caribous.
Yeah, they're also cool. So we provide all the equipment you'll need, and we'll show you how to use it, all before you get started. But before we get too carried away with all the details, let's bring Jeff and Carl in, and we'll talk more about the various via ferratas.
Well, now that we know where they are, Jeff, why don't you start us off by telling us more about what a via ferrata actually is and why they were originally built?
I can do that. Hello, everyone. So what is a via ferrata? A via ferrata is a climbing route. Via ferrata is Italian, which translates to the Iron Path. The quick story of their history is during World War I, many via ferratas were built to move troops through the steep terrain of the Italian Dolomites. And following the war, they sat idle for a lot of years until climbers began using them for recreation. And via ferratas are incredibly popular now in Europe, but still relatively new to North America. And as you can see in the photos there, the Iron Path is created by building a kind of ladder out of rebar rungs. And following the via ferrata is a stainless steel cable, which is there for safety.
Well, thanks for that background, Jeff. Now, Carl, why don't you tell us what's involved in building a Via Ferrata?
Sure thing, Ali. Hi, everyone. So planning and scouting the appropriate location, that was sort of the first step in building our first Ferrata Mount Nimbus. And with Nimbus, this took a good couple years of planning as we were looking for a very specific site. We were looking for a wild mountain summit that was south-facing, so that it wouldn't hold too much snow, and it would also give us the ability to change course in the event of bad weather. And after a lot of back and forth, we decided on Mount Nimbus, which met all of these specific criteria we were looking for. Then comes the hard part, which is the actual building and construction. So being a high exposed mountain peak, building was tricky, as all the materials needed to be slung into place by helicopter. And then we would generally build from the top down. Often we would need to rappel down ropes to drill steps, set protection cables. The famous bridge of Nimbus, this actually came around as a means to avoid a very poor section of rock on the peak. Originally, we were going to build a zip line and to avoid that section, but in the end, we thought a bridge would be much more exciting and easier to manage. And 3 days later, we had a bridge. The total construction of Nimbus, that took us about 2 summers. So we did that over the course of 2 summers. The next one was the sky ladder. And Peter, why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Yeah, so building the sky ladder is very similar to Carl's and the Bobby Burns experiences, but it was over here in the Bugaboos. And we also had to scout out the area. It was actually an old mountaineering route that we turned into a Via Ferrata. And we had to sling in most of the equipment by helicopter, just like they did in the Bobby Burns. And there was lots of rappelling and lots of drilling. But what's unique about it too is it's actually really hard physical labor. Like but it's really rewarding as well because you're creating something. So you're moving these big loads of equipment and materials, through the vertical environment. And you also have the opportunity to move these big loose boulders and sort of trundle them down out of the way. So there's no overhead hazards. So you're basically just cleaning the route so there's no rockfall and making it a safe experience. And Jeff, why don't you tell us about the Zilmers up in the Caribous?
Yeah, I can do that. Zilmer Canyon is the newest Via Ferrata to the CMH world. Our planning and construction was a little bit different. We were super excited to build the Via Ferrata at the Caribous, and Zilmer Canyon was the obvious choice just due to the stunning scenery and the beautiful, clean, solid rock we found. It didn't really require much cleaning at all. We were also used a helicopter to sling equipment and hardware into place. And we decided to tackle the route really fast and hard over a 3-week span with 12 mountain guides. And we just spread out and took our sections and went to work. We wanted Zilmer to be achievable for all abilities, but we also wanted to build something that would push the envelope of wild and challenge even our most adventurous guests. So, to see how psyched our guests are at the end of the day, it just makes all the work worthwhile.
Well, thanks for all of those build details, everyone. Now, Carl, why would a person climb a Via Ferrata instead of just hiking there?
That's a good question, Ali. Why would someone want to climb a Via Ferrata? The great thing about a Via Ferrata is it allows you to access incredibly wild and remote places in the mountains in a completely safe and controlled manner. It lets people climb their first mountain peak, explore glacier-fed canyons, waterfalls. It really lets you push your own personal boundaries, have an adventure, and know that it's completely safe.
That sounds fantastic. Well, thanks for that, Carl. Now, Jeff, could you tell us what a guided day looks like on the Ferrata and the type of gear and equipment needed, as well as how you train us on using it?
You bet. We do provide all the climbing equipment, which includes a helmet, harness, and specially designed lanyards to clip onto the steel cable with. While climbing, a thin pair of gloves, similar to these ones, are nice. They protect your hands. And we recommend footwear that's a bit lighter than a regular boot, something a little bit flexible versus fully rigid. A major part of the safety is training guests to correctly use those lanyards. And as Peter referred to them, the semi-technical term is clippy clippies, which is the term I like. It's just more fun to say than lanyards. And as you'll learn, we always have one clippy clippy on the cable all the time. This is called the lobster claw. And if you want to make a guide's stomach turn and heart skip a beat, you can see what that does. We don't recommend it. We also give folks tips to climb safely. And, there's always something to hold on to. Where the terrain gets steep, there's always a rebar rung. And where the easier terrain is, or where appropriate, we use the rock for handholds and footholds.
Well, that sounds great, Jeff. I'm pretty excited about using those clippy clippies. Very technical. Now, Carl, I'm wondering if I need previous experience to do the Via Ferrata or if it's quite user-friendly for any level.
Ali, absolutely no experience at all. None. For most of our guests, this is a first-time experience. Your first afternoon out hiking with the guide, and this gives you an opportunity to assess your ability, answer questions, and discuss which ferrata would be probably most appropriate for you. Of course, you're going to need a basic level of fitness as you'll be gaining a certain amount of elevation and distance over the course of the day. Nimbus and Skyladder, I would say they're quite high exposed climbing routes. So if you have a crippling fear of heights, these might not be so enjoyable. However, our Conrad and Zilmer ferratas, these are much more accessible with a lot of variations. So it's a bit of a pick your own adventure to how much excitement you would want on those.
Well, I love a good pick your own adventure. With the 4 different Via Ferratas, let's talk about each experience and key highlights of each one. So Carl, back to you. Why don't you start us off with the Bobby Burns?
All right, Ali. So in the Bobby Burns, we actually have 2 Via Ferratas. The first one, a Nimbus. And Nimbus, we are going to climb a mountain peak. So over the course of the day, we will gain about 600 meters from where we land to the summit. It starts out with a mix of short bits of hiking interspersed with easy climbing sections using gear and techniques that we've shown you. And that gets you used to them as we go along. At the midpoint of Nimbus, this is where they start to ramp up. And we'll start to climb rock walls, 45-degree slabs, cross a 600-meter high suspension bridge, and this will eventually lead you to the summit. And there we get to enjoy incredible views of the Rockies, Purcells, Selkirk mountain ranges. And then from that point, we have to get down, but we'll save that part for when you're here. Nimbus actually is one of Destination Canada's Canadian signature experiences. And this is a collection of once-of-a-lifetime travel experiences that are found only here in Canada. So quite cool. We also have one other Via Ferrata in the Bobby Burns called the Conrad. And this is completely different. It's an adventure hike with big water and even bigger glaciers. We start by winding our way up a canyon along the main outflow creek of the Conrad ice field. And we'll follow along glacier-polished rock, cross fast-moving water on Burma bridges, zip lines, and there's some short little climbing sections which will take you past cascading waterfalls, which leads us right up to the toe of the ice field. This is probably one of the most photogenic spots I've ever been in the mountains. Just amazing with the colors and the rock, the water, the ice, the snow. It's all in one spot. It also might have one of the coolest swimming holes anywhere, what we call the Blue Lagoon. Yeah, just stunning with the Conrad ice field as your background. Neat thing about the Conrad Ferrata is it can be a half day or a full day activities. If you do go all the way to the top, same, one of the most scenic views in all of BC. And yeah, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So rather than me trying to talk about it, here's a little teaser of what they're all about.
Wow. Well, I've been lucky to have done both of the ferratas at the Bobby Burns, and it is quite the experience. Now, Peter, why don't you tell us all about the bugaboos?
Yeah, thanks, Ali. Yeah, the Via Ferratas and the Bobby Burns are awesome. And I love in that video. I love those shots of people crossing the Burma bridges and zip lines across the raging water. It's so much fun. So next up we have the Bugaboo Skyladder, and this adventure starts when you land in a high sort of alpine valley below Trundle Peak, and that takes about, then you take I should say about a 20-minute walk through alpine wildflowers and then over boulders, and that gets you to the start. From there, your guide will show you how to use all of the equipment and train you in a couple of different climbing techniques, and then effectively off you go. So on this particular route, you're climbing with your guide across sort of these high rock ledges, some very steep rock faces, and then you're on ridges. And there's places where it's actually quite tricky, but when it really gets really tricky, there's an iron rung to give you a bit of help. And some of those tricky moves that aren't that, well, they're tricky, but there's we'll say there's a lot of air underneath your feet on some of those moves. And then you take it all the way up to the summit, which is at 8,500 feet. And usually by the time we get there, it's lunchtime. So you get to have lunch at one of the best lunch spots in the Bugaboos. After lunch, you carry along Black Forest Ridge. So this is, half-day Via Ferrata. Carry along Black Forest Ridge. You go past Cobalt Lake. Some people go down and actually take a dip in it. It's not quite as warm as, we'll say, the Bobby Burns Blue Lagoon, because Cobalt Lake has a glacier running right into it. So it's usually pretty quick. And at the end of the day, you carry on the ridge and you finish with this amazing overlook of the spires and the glaciers of the Bugaboos. It's sort of one of the more iconic Bugaboo hikes. But like Carl said, pictures 1,000 words, and enough of me talking. Let's show that video.
All right. Well, the Sky Ladder is definitely on my list of adventures to experience. Also on that list is the Zilmer. It seems I need to get out a bit more. I've heard a lot of great things about our newest Via Ferrata. So, Jeff, what can you tell us about it?
Well, up here in the Caribous, we'd love to have you up here, Ali, and show you the Zilmer Via Ferrata. A couple things that really stand out about the Zilmer Via Ferrata is just the sheer scale of everything around you. The helicopter lands us at 1,300 meters near the valley floor, and some of the mountaintops are near 2,000 meters above us. We can't even see the glaciers yet, but we will as the day progresses. The other wonderful thing is just the sound of waterfalls. There's waterfalls everywhere you look, some smaller ones, some bigger ones, and some really long ones. We start with some easier walls to climb, a bit of a warm-up, lots of time to practice your clippy-clippies, and then bang, we take a zip line right into the climbing, and the first main wall is right beside this huge, powerful, thundering waterfall. It's completely awesome. And that's one of the sections that provide 3 different options for a pick your own adventure. The colors of the canyon are absolutely beautiful. I look forward to showing Carl this one day. Maybe we can challenge his photogenic spots. And the rest of the route have all type of adventures and surprises, which you'll have to come to experience for yourself. This video will show you a little taste of it, but truly it just doesn't capture how amazing the climbing experience is.
Well, there you have it. Now, Jeff, why don't you take a few moments to elaborate on the safety side of things a little bit more?
I can definitely do that. Yeah, first off, all the hardware used in the building of these routes is excessively strong. The bolts that attach the cable to the rock are rated to over 5,000 pounds, and the cable itself is rated to over 10,000 pounds. And we're extremely diligent about the maintenance of this hardware. We do an extremely thorough inspection at the beginning of each season, which includes retorquing every single bolt and inspecting every single inch of cable. And we're consistently inspecting the route every time we guide it. As Carl mentioned, we do spend time with the guests before taking them to the Via Ferrata, which allows us to discuss the challenges and concerns that some folks may have. We do need a certain level of ability and a certain level of confidence before taking guests to these Via Ferratas. And we do have time to talk about that before we go.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, as Jeff mentioned, safety is always our #1 priority when we go out and do these Via Ferratas and these summer adventure programs. So now it's time to turn the tables over to you, the viewers, and ask our skill testing question for today's huddle. So today's question, name 2 of the 4 Via Ferratas we have at CMH. And again, that's name 2 of the 4 Via Ferratas we have at CMH. Get on the live chat, throw in your answers, people. To keep things fair, though, what we'll do is, for those who answer correctly, we're going to take all of your names and put them in a hat for Ali to draw from. So while we're waiting for the responses and converting your digital answers to paper, we're going to run through our rapid fire questions with Jeff and Carl.
We sure are. Here we go. So, Carl, what is your favorite CMH lodge?
Good question, Ali. They are all pretty special. I've been at the Bobby Burns for a lot of years, but I'm going to say the Caribous.
A shocking twist in answer. And what about for you, Jeff?
Well, I would have to agree with you, Carl. They are all very special. And I have some pretty amazing memories of 5 summers at the Bobby Burns that I cherish, and I would highly recommend taking a trip there.
Okay, so shout out to both of those lodges. And Carl, what is your favorite CMH meal?
Well, I don't know if I can pick just one, but I would probably say the fresh baked bread every night at dinner.
It is hard to beat that. And Jeff, what about you?
Well, Ali, my answer is a resounding yes to all of them. But when I think about summer, I do get very excited about the breakfast frittatas.
Ah, okay. And Carl, what is your favorite hike at CMH?
Ooh, there is so many to choose from. I would have to say one that stands out for me is roller coaster. This is a remote area on the west side of the Purcells, true wilderness. You're hiking through a mix of alpine ridges, flower-filled meadows, glaciers, alpine lakes. Yeah, just to walk through the whole thing would take a good couple days.
A little bit of everything. And then Jeff, what about you? What's your favorite hike at CMH?
I'd have to say my favorite hike is up here in the Caribous, and it's a hike we call Crazy Horse, and it's a must-do. The hike is all about glaciers. Starts right from the landing site is in this huge cirque with massive glaciers above your head. We try to take guests onto the ice. We try to take them under the ice, and we hike up beside this South Canoe Glacier for most of the day, and it just keeps impressing the further you go.
Sounds incredible. Well, for our final rapid fire question, Carl, what does CMH mean to you?
There's a lot of things. I guess for me, CMH is about sharing and enabling wild, remote mountain experiences for almost everyone. It's amazing to see a family from 5 to 95 all go out, find an adventure that excites them in the mountains that day. And then to see them come back and share that with each other, the other guests they've met that day, and the staff in the lodge.
All right, that's what it's all about for sure. And for you, Jeff, what does CMH mean for you?
Yeah, Carl said that really nicely. You know, we're so lucky to spend time in these big, beautiful, remote places. And what CMH does is bring together people who share that passion, the guests and the staff. And I love that I get to be a part of that. You know, we all have our personal motivations. Some people come here to relax in the peacefulness of the mountains, and others come to be inspired. Some folks want to get some exercise, maybe a lot of exercise. And some folks just really want to get that new super awesome profile picture, and that's okay.
Lots of great motivations there. Well, thanks so much for those answers, Carl and Jeff, and thank you for joining us on today's huddle. We really appreciate having you. Now it's time for the giveaway. We've all been waiting for this, so I'm going to pass things back over to Peter.
Thanks, Allie. Yeah, Jeff, I'm going to have to work on my profile picture, I think. Yeah, that's a good one. So we reviewed the responses to the skill testing question, and the correct answers to the question is Nimbus, Conrad, Skyladder, or Zilmer. Okay, Allie, let's see that hat and draw a name.
I am mixing them all up right now, and our winner is Rob Wilson. Our contact information is listed below, so please get in touch with us and we'll get your shipping details. Awesome. Well, now we're going to take a few minutes to answer some questions. So the first question is for Carl. What if I want to do the Via Ferrata, but the rest of my family does not?
That actually is one of the great parts about summer at CMH. So there's an opportunity for everyone to find their own adventure. So if you want to come and do the Via Ferrata and have an exciting day doing that, that's totally possible. At the same time, there's something for the rest of your family. Maybe it's getting a chance to explore an incredible remote wilderness hike. And one of the funnest parts is watching everyone at the end of the day come back and share their stories about what they did.
All right, that sounds great. Well, the next question is for Jeff. What happens if my nerves get the better of me halfway up the Ferrata? Do I have to stay there forever?
Well, Allie, the great part about being that nervous is that I can guarantee you won't be thinking about if you left the lights on at home. But seriously here, it does happen. People do occasionally get nervous en route, and the CMH guides have tons of tricks up their sleeves to help you get over that hurdle. Simply being right next to the guide can do the trick for most nervous guests. All guides carry a section of climbing rope with them, which can be added into the system, which kind of creates a warm hug feeling. And as Carl mentioned, the Bobby Burns Conrad Via Ferrata and the Caribou Zilmer Via Ferrata do have alternate routes, which we can take. But most importantly, if you do find out that you're on this type of adventure and it just really wasn't what you were expecting and it's not for you, we make it a priority to get to a landing site and the helicopter can whisk you away to join a hiking group.
Okay, it sounds like we've got some options. Well, I'm going to pass things over to Peter to do some questions from the live chat. Peter.
All right, thanks, Allie. We've got a question from Janet Roberts. Safety question. Says, it looks like you have to unclip your clippy at various points along the cable route. True? Safe? Question mark. Jeff, you kind of quickly talked about that, but why don't you just go over the process of using the clippies?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Janet. Good question. So we do have two clippies. And like I said earlier, this is definitely one of the most important parts of the safety training we do with folks. That cable does slide along the route, and every so often there will be an anchor bolt into the rock. And the reason we have two is you very slowly take one off, clip past the bolt, and then with the same hand, take the other one and clip past the bolt. If you kind of go too fast along, that's where we get involved with that lobster claw thing, and that's where the guide's stomachs start turning.
Good one. Yep. So the lobster claw means both clippies are not on the cable.
That's right. That is right.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got. I think I'll say Shell Strongren. Can you do both Via Ferratas on the lodge to lodge trip? Carl, why don't you answer that?
So on the lodge to lodge trip at the Bobby Burns, we have the Nimbus and Conrad Ferrata. And I would say most guests when they're at the Bobby Burns will end up doing both of those. And then at the Bugaboos, they have the Skyladder. And actually, a lot of our lodge to lodge guests will also do that one. So you can actually do three.
Awesome. And then I've got a question from Paul Chassin. Paul, throwing me the hard balls after those softballs. He says, can you speak to environmental concerns with Via Ferratas? Yeah, I'll answer that one. Yeah, Paul, I certainly can. So our via ferratas, we basically set them up on routes that either have a lot of erosion or there's a lot of loose rock. And what we end up doing is we're being on the harder surface, so we're not impacting the soft flora and fauna around in the alpine environment. But there's no doubt we definitely drill holes in the rock and we put in the safety cables and the rungs. So if we were in a position where we weren't able to do via ferratas anymore, we would go back and remove that mountain litter, call it, and if depending on if we were able to or whatnot, we can actually go back backfill those holes with sort of local eroded sand and a little bit of glue, so the holes are then filled. Hopefully that answers the question. That's a fair question. It's a tough one. So, another couple of questions. We have sort of a more general question, apparently. Do you have any recommended training to get in shape for via ferrata? Carl, why don't you do that one?
Absolutely. As mentioned before, you don't really need any experience. A good base of fitness helps. So yeah, if you're doing a fair bit of hiking, that's great. Specific gym training, you do need a little bit of upper body strength, but it's more if you have a good sense of balance. So yeah, maybe a couple times at the climbing gym. And but as Jeff had mentioned there, we do have a variety of ferratas to have a good experience on.
Yeah, great. And along that theme, again, another general question that came up. Do you have a via ferrata you'd recommend for the nervous first timer? How about Jeff, you want to answer that one?
Absolutely. Yeah, the great thing about the Bobby Burns via ferrata, which we call the Conrad, and the Caribou's via ferrata, which we call Zilmer Canyon, is that both of these via ferratas offer a pick your own adventure style for everybody. So they can accommodate people who are out there looking for the wildest, most exciting trip they can find, and they can also accommodate someone who just wants a wonderful yet still challenging experience in the mountains with the least amount of intimidation as possible.
Oh, cool. That's great. Well, that's sort of the end of the questions that I have to answer. The other ones will be answered, of course, by our guest services. That's all the time we have today. So now to wrap up for summer episode, I'd like to tell you about our final huddle. On April 22nd, we're going to have Ask a Guide Anything. So actually, I expect, Paul, you're going to come ask some really hard questions. But this is a fun, interactive one where we will field questions through the live chat, just like what we did at the end. And the crew will be legendary guide Rob Rohn, along with some of the familiar faces from previous huddles. So we have Mike Welsh, Steve Chambers, Craig McGee, and Brody Smith, who is now a realtor and assistant area manager in the Bugaboos.
Well, that sounds awesome. Definitely looking forward to that final heli huddle. Well, from all of us thinking of climbing mountains and via ferratas this summer up here in the Great White North in our favorite hockey jerseys, cheers, and thanks for joining us on another fun, fact-filled episode of CMH's virtual heli huddles. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.